Thank you. Get set up here. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bridie McGreavy. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Communication and Journalism at the University of Maine. I'd like to introduce Gabby Hillyer, who is a PhD student in the Department of Ecology and Environmental Sciences. Our first session of the day is focused on interdisciplinary approaches to shellfish conservation and improving water quality. Starting off with an introduction to the Maine Shellfish Learning Network, you may hear us refer to this as the MSLN. The Maine Shellfish Learning Network is an organization that responds to many of the problems that you're all grappling with and that we're going to hear about today in a number of different presentations, where we know that landings are way down, some of their lowest levels historically. They've been in decline consistently. Climate change appears to be getting worse. For many of us who are working on water quality, we know that this is a really wicked problem. That you fix one part of it and then you realize another problem pops up in another place, think you're making progress, and then the situation changes. So these environmental problems are certainly complicating the work in sustaining shellfishing as a livelihood. And then there are a whole set of social issues that go along with this as well, where towns and people need resources to be able to do this work. And a lot of this is compounded by many different types of unknowns. Data gaps, lack of scientific information, and so we're really grappling with what's a pretty complicated situation. However, solutions are happening. And I think the work that's going on across the coast within Maine's shellfishery gives us a lot of room for optimism and hope. If we look at just over the last 5 years, the number of different collaborative partnerships that have come together to really collectively address many of these kinds of issues and more, you can see there's great work that's going on in the Down East Fisheries Partnership that has just put out a strategic plan that's focusing specifically on intertidal ecosystems and shellfish co-management. Jessica Joyce's work, and along with many others down in the Casco Bay Regional Shellfish Working Group, convening groups in that area to focus on technical solutions. We have people across the coast, but led by Schoodic Institute, Down East Institute, Town of Goldsboro, doing these community science investigations. Really innovative approaches of linking schools and towns to fill those data gaps, build relationships, create an identity around clamming. And then the 29 projects in the Maine Shellfish Restoration and Resilience Fund is really adding to all of this collective impact. So it's great to see this coming together. The Maine Shellfish Restoration and Resilience Fund in particular is a seed grant fund that's available to harvesters and Maine towns, where you can apply for grants of between $1,000 and up to $20,000 to do these applied shellfish projects. This was the brainchild of Andrea Perry, who's in the front here, the Broadreach Fund of the Maine Community Foundation. Spent of months and years scoping out the opportunities and needs within small-scale fisheries and came up with this idea, launched a partnership with the University of Maine and a number of other people, including folks who have formed on our Science Advisory Committee. So the Science Advisory Committee is an important group that has helped develop the request for proposals, gotten the word out to towns, and then helps review all the proposals as well. So I wanted to acknowledge the work of Kathy Billings from Deer Isle, Stonington, Victor Doyle from Mount Desert, Tony Sutton, who is at UMaine and also in the Passamaquoddy tribe at Sabayak, Chris Peterson from College of the Atlantic, who's here down in the front, and Dennis Marknall from the Maine Department of Marine Resources. We've also been helped by Amanda Moser at Antioch University, New England. Members of the Shellfish Advisory Council have been really proactive in giving us feedback and also getting the word out. Partnered with DMR and especially the area biologists, Hannah Annis, Heidi Layton, Ari Leach, and DP. And then I think I saw Steve Jones somewhere here. Has been really helpful with the UNH Jackson Lab in doing water quality. So this has been a really broad coalition of folks who've been supportive of these projects and the development of this fund. So the Maine Shellfish Learning Network seeks to build on the relationships that are already existing and that have been strengthened through the MSRF, and then also help these projects get off the ground. This was a starting point for us. We wanted to create an organization that would help projects connect, especially projects that are working on similar topics, so that not only people not reproducing the wheel, reinventing the wheel, but we can collectively learn from each other and make these projects better over time. So our focus has been to develop community-driven solutions through communication. And we had a grand plan to start, and as often happens with these grant projects, as we got out on the ground, we realized, oh, there's some immediate problem solving that we needed to do. So we started to have more focused, informal conversations with a number of different folks, set up a smaller set of meetings focused on water quality, leadership, and seeding. And then this built to a large network launch that we had back in September. We had 33 people from diverse backgrounds across multiple sectors within the shell fishery, focused on open-ended discussion and brainstorming, learning across these different projects, and then importantly, action planning to identify the priorities for the Maine Shellfish Learning Network and create a plan of action so that we could continue to advance this work together. So now Gabby's going to walk us through the priority action items and some of the progress that we've made initially.
Hello. So I believe actually at our network launch meeting, Victor Doyle was attributed saying that the Maine Shellfish Learning Network should be a doing network, not simply a talking network. And we've really taken that to heart in trying to progress as much as possible on the stakeholder-driven priority action items for this organization. So to walk you through the 5 that were identified at the September launch meeting, the first was to connect key actors in water quality decision-making and shellfish project permit regulation, mainly because there still seems to be a lot of lack of transparency and clarity around how those decisions are made. We wanted to focus on strengthening communication between towns and the DMR, as well as other state organizations through annual reporting and information systems, conduct research focused on market strategies and policy options, and then finally continuing to build learning resources, including technical briefs or digital media techniques and others, and relationships with governmental and municipal partners. So really our main focus is trying to, at any point in any way, advance these different action items through a number of different things that I'll describe now. So focusing on water quality. So our first kind of action item on connecting key actors. Myself and our undergraduate, Victoria Curie, have been working on connecting with partners across water quality decision making. So over the last few months, I've been hosting different meetings with members from DMR, DEP, Department of Ag, and others to really kind of hone in on how these decisions are made. This has culminated in developing a visual decision tree that creates transparency around these decisions and the state management roles. As you can see here, we have a couple of photos from our meeting even just on Monday. And we're hoping to hold more meetings around specific aspects of this graphic and develop general facts around the kinds of pollution and different ways that you can use science to try and identify and solve those issues. Moving on towards learning resources. We continue to broaden resources for new methodologies with the communities that are working through the Maine Shellfish Restoration and Resilience Fund. So specifically, we've been reaching out to a number of the project leaders to identify the methods that they've used, problems they've faced, and try and incorporate that into a document that we can then send out to other members of the learning network and farther out from there. We've also been developing an online database. So this is a type of living document that focuses on shellfish policy efforts. So the idea being here that we can understand better what documents affecting the intertidal are meeting the legislature and what are the outcomes, and we can also start researching the public dialogue around those efforts. Finally, we are also working on building a new online database, which is full of different data sets, methodologies, contact lists, and other resources for shellfish communities who want to start but don't know quite where to go at the very beginning, as well as link them to other communities who have already started working on similar projects. So our kind of next steps along that are to hold scoping meetings around that database and that web resource to see, what are the requirements, what do people actually want out of that, and what to call it. And then I will turn this back over to Bridie.
We're also in the process of developing an engaged communication research project that focuses on 2 main questions. What difference do these projects make? and we're focusing specifically on how communication shapes the process and outcomes. We're going to be doing interviews, observations, looking at media and document analysis. We're hoping to gather stories from the mudflat, stories from people who are out doing these kinds of projects, lessons learned, collect this information in such a way that it can be shared. We want to scope out perceptions about shellfish policy, and then the engaged part of this work is that we want to gather this information in such a way that helps us improve these efforts and projects over time. So feeding this back to our core partners, to the Broad Reach Fund, so that we can make more informed decisions about this collective work. So we're going to be launching that in the next week or two. You may be hearing from us. Next steps, as Gabby described, we're really focusing on this web resource. We have multiple components of it already built, and we need to move the platform forward, so we're going to be doing some scoping meetings for that. Continuing to engage the softshell clamming communities, especially the new projects that are funded on the MSRF. Conduct the research on process and outcomes, and fortunately, Gabby is now working with a related project that's funded through the National Science Foundation to create a national research traineeship in conservation science at Maine. So she has secure funding for the next 4 years to be able to continue this work, and we want to be able to leverage this fund and yeah, keep this good work going. So contact information, we're also giving a poster presentation this afternoon if you want to come up and talk with us directly, and then certainly in the Q&A, but here's our contact information.